going. The main thing is probably recording this for the benefit of others who aren't here and with us. Week 3, clearly a lot of people are busy trying to get their blogs done and their reflections done, and probably putting a little more emphasis on it than they should. It's really only worth 6 marks, and frankly, to be honest, it's not going to be hard to get 6 out of 6, I can assure you, because the task is really straightforward and people are basically overdoing it. But that's good. That's good because it gives you lots of material for your major piece, which is 64% of the assessment item 1, whereas this is only 36% stretched over 3 weeks. So, it's good to be down there writing now and getting the technologies right. So let's get going. Now, I put together a slideshow. I actually posted these online. I had a couple of requests from people who wanted the static PowerPoints, and look, I have no trouble with that. I'd prefer actually be using Prezi or doing something a bit more interactive, but at least we're getting information out there. It's up to you really what you identify, because it's all not worth the same. I mean, some of it's much more valuable to you for assessment purposes than others. A couple of things you should be doing by the end of the week. Come to terms with your technical difficulties. Grow your skills and your literacies. Get as far as you can in setting up the process so we can troubleshoot rather than instruct. And that's happening a lot via email at the moment too. So thank you, people. Keep them coming. Understand ways in which web spaces are currently being used in schools with examples of potential. Understand the importance of scaffolding, thinking so that students are always supported with explicit knowledge, metacognition in digital spaces. Explore differences of cultures of learning content, cultures of thinking in the classroom. Discuss in detail the requirements of the embedded assessment task, which is due this week, and negotiate due dates of this task for your campus cohort. Now, our tutorial, our online tutorial, is not till 4:30 or 4 o'clock on a Thursday, so some people may need to try and negotiate an extension. Please get in touch with me if you do. It's much better if I know you're negotiating an extension than if I find out by surprise. We can look at the Web 2. This week we talk about Web 2. And Web 2 is I'm a little bit cynical about Web 2. It's part of the hypersphere. And when we look at it, we think they're huge, we think they're massive, but really, like computer games, they really don't matter at all. They've all become very mundane. We think about the unprecedented growth of MySpace, Facebook, and social media seems pretty important right now. For instance, a close friend of mine works on the social media convener for the Commonwealth Games. Huge task. And he travels around the world for each Commonwealth Games, organising the social media events for it and the social media systems. But in the end, it's going to become just another long string of putatively disruptive, massively hyped technologies that are really just one more niche in a belt. Okay, they're not that special. Social media is a functional advance, pimped out as a revolution, and really, when we look at what we're doing now, all the leading likes and dislikes on social media, they're all founding their own social media sites and drawing people away from Facebook and the MySpace origins. So Web 2 can be used interchangeably with social media, basically because it's about what people do. It's about bringing people together, the definition of Web 2 and social media. So it's really the internet mediated through people, and that's what we're talking about. So it's any digital environment built on the contributions of and interactions amongst people, unless, of course, you go to dogster.com where it's their dogs. We've got hamsters.com, where you can read about a hamster named Pistachio who's been on there since January 2005, so he's pretty ancient. And believe it or not, he likes jumping, climbing and eating broccoli. So social media, Web 2, not all of it's valuable stuff. And that's the point I raise here. Is it transformative? It's been around since the dawn of the web, really. When we look at GeoCities, GeoCities was horrible, but it was still a social network. People have been able to blog about themselves for years. More recently, they've been able to upload photos, video, music, and so forth. So that's a recent phenomenon, what we call Web 2. You can ping through hundreds of profiles in a matter of minutes, sort, rank, drop, poke, all the things you used to do in real time. Flickr, okay, we can see photo repositories, the seductory looks of people on their Flickr page with their imaginary friends. You can join a cult on vampirefreaks.com. Then we've got some different uses with Grindr and Tinder. It's really all about choice. As social as you are, is your media will reflect that particular pattern. But go back to last week. When we're talking about digital pedagogies and digital tools, remember that lower order thinking occurs when students are asked to receive or recite factual information or to employ rules and algorithms through repetitive routines. The instruction process is simply to transmit knowledge or practice procedural routines. So, you know, there's a caveat that comes with this. Technology may be great, it may be social, but, you know, is it leading to higher learning outcomes? On blogs, we post comments. On social networks, we make friends. On social news, we vote for articles. And on wikis, we share information. And that's really the bottom line from this week's work. When we look at Web 2, we can actually break it down into these, you know, these little clusters of families. Blogs, we post comments. And I want to be very specific here. Your first reflective piece, piece 3.1, was about blogs. Have a close look at the question. Don't misread the question. Okay, it's not about wikis, it's not about streaming, it's about blogs. Okay, it's step one in the process. Social networks are totally different. Social news is totally different. And wikis, of course, it's about collaborative knowledge, so it's totally different once again. Go back to this diagram from last week. Again, yep, task 3.1 asks you to link back. So there should be some consideration of low-level pedagogy versus high-level pedagogy in your response when we start to look at blogs. Yes, we can use it to distribute information when no one chats, no one discusses. It's very much at the control of the person leading the blog or posting the blogs. Or we can invite a range of people in. We can host meetings in there. There's a whole range of ways we can apply to make it a high-level technology. I'll move on from that. We're quite familiar with that diagram. Packet refers to the term blog, and it was initiated by Barger in 1997. And it's basically as a log of web activity. Now, my model, the contributory model of learning, is one that I actually adhere and I've been plugging quite relentlessly. The main reason is you've got to have a model in which you can hang your hat on, because when you get into a school, you're going to say to yourself, well, how much can I do of what I want to do? How many resources are here to support this? What's missing? How do I fill in the gaps? So if you have a model in mind, you then know how to cope with the gaps. And it's really important. Your model is really your best worldview. This is what I want when I go into a classroom. Rarely are you going to get that. And then you need to become the teacher. You need to start to compromise and make those really important pedagogical decisions. Which tools are available, which can you use, and which can't you use. We know, for instance, a lot of schools actually ban mobile phones. I went to Cairns High School where I was teaching and coordinating the International Baccalaureate, and we got it established there. And in every class I used mobile phones as part of my teaching. There's some great freeware there where you can actually run a live questionnaire with your students. You can be teaching up the front and post questions to the website, and students vote. They nominate, and you can get a running picture of how they feel about particular issues that are being covered in the classroom. This little section here is pretty straightforward. Most of you are working with a blog, but it just explains blogs have, and this is part of your response this week, it's about blogs. Blogs have a particular character. They differ from traditional websites, and they provide many advantages. And they're a huge step up. Duffy, Peter and Bruns, Peters and Axel, 2006, wrote this great article. There's a couple of guys down at QUT. They talk about the easy creation of new pages. Your new data is entered into a blog, usually through a simple form submitted by the blogger or member person, updating the blog with little or no technical background. The novice's web authoring tool. And again, your reflections may want to talk about the fact that here you are in week 3, you've gone from 0 to 100. You're doing web authoring. The filtering of content, it can be filtered for various blog entries by date, by category, by author. Any attribute you decide to set a filter up for. Most blog platforms allow the administrator to invite and add other authors. It can therefore become an expert blog. It can become an interactive blog. It can become a debating blog. Providing a personal writing space, easy, shareable, archived, ability to link and interlink to form learning communities, and it's got the opportunity to serve as a digital portfolio of student assignments. They can basically, as we're doing, they can basically list a series of linked and strung and threaded discussions, and that can become the basis on which they then go back and reflect and compile a position. And extensions into fully featured content management systems. So you can actually use the blog in a wide range of different systems. Fernette and Brock Eide, cited by Will Richardson in blogs, wikis, podcasts, and other powerful web tools for classrooms. Okay, did I go backwards there? No, they can provide critical and analytical thinking, creative, intuitive, associational thinking. That's a really important task. Once upon a time, you know, we actually had to present 2 bits of paper to students to get a social thinking going. Now we can do it basically just by brainstorming with different perspectives in a blog. We can get them to thread, we can get them to comment, we can get them to go through a blog and identify the interlinked ideas, those for, those against, what the overlap is, the middle ground, and what a possible solution might be. The student can actually draw up a concept map from there. And we can promote analogical thinking. Okay, it's really important to have a look at that, how we can actually manage to do that. Potential for increased access, exposure to quality information, combination of solitary and social interaction. So these are all the things that we can do with our blogs. Okay, we are drawing people out of the learning closet. We're opening up the classroom. We're creating a stable platform. The platform is a shared one. Resources are a common one. But then the discussion and the posting on the blog can start to open those resources up for examination, hence the connection to deeper learning. The educational use of blogs. A person with an academic perspective on a blog can support reflection on teaching experiences, categorise descriptions, resources and methodologies for teaching, and this is something that some of you are doing at the moment. You're making links to different resources, you're integrating different technologies by drawing them in. For instance, Google Docs, you're pulling those down, you're creating tables, you are bringing all of these different things together, resources and methodologies for teaching. You've got ramblings regarding professional challenges and teaching tips for other academics. You can actually, and we're getting a lot of that in our discussion forum. And the illustration of specific technology-related tips for other colleagues, again, a great deal of sharing. And I noticed the comments flowing back in the blogs where people are actually admiring and complimenting each other on the solutioning and the problem solving that's going on. So we're seeing that from an academic perspective. We're also seeing from an organisational perspective, the blog is very good at creating an online presence for unit-related information. And we can see this with our Moodle, our calendars, events, assignments and resources. And we can see it, we can see it lived in this particular assessment task number 1. These relationships are being established. It also creates an online area for students to post contact details and queries relating to assessment. And we're seeing, here's some of the deeper learning. All right, we've got 5 weeks of work, but exactly what is the end product? What is required? How do I get there? What are the steps I need to take? Am I on track? So there's a very, very formative element to a blog. And it's a really good way where you get peer-to-peer formation, you get teacher-to-student formation, and you get network-to-network formation. So we're seeing quite an integrated learning environment. There's also the pedagogical perspective, and here's where you're going to be doing a fair bit of reflecting in your written task. A blog can support comments based on literature readings and student responses, and I often find myself getting in there saying to people, yes, great, fantastic, looks really, really good, all the positive noises you can make. It's a collaborative space. You review each other's work and you look at course-related materials. There's so much helping and support going on. There's a lot of peer learning going on. Images and reflections related to industry placement. We can see that in some of the other subjects, not so much in this one. An online gallery space for reviews of works, writings in progress, making use especially of commenting features. And anyone teaching art, a blog is a perfect space to put up reviews of artworks. You can use some of the audio software and put up reviews of music. Again, encourage reviews of music. There's so many ways you can use the blog, and we're just touching the base of that now. Teachers can encourage reactions, reflections and ideas by commenting on their students' blogs. It's always good to try and push someone a little bit further. I noticed that with one example, a student actually posted an image of a table, and then when I sort of challenged the image, okay, that's great, that's static, but what if the data changes? You've then got to go and produce that image all over again. Why not create a live Google Doc and then post that Google Doc so you can actually just keep updating the Google Doc? Brilliant. The student went away and did that, thinking, okay, that's a much better way to do it. I now have a dynamic resource that keeps changing with my needs. And of course, ultimately, the development of a student portfolio of work, which brings us to our second assessment item, which we'll be doing in Weebly, not as a blog, but in Weebly as a web resource. So we go back to the SAMR model, and we can see here that, you know, technology very much is about converting, you know, using SAMR to substitute, augment, modify, and redefine. So we're taking existing practices and we're substituting them with digital tools. We're augmenting, you know, Bloom's taxonomy. We're augmenting existing skills, and we're actually integrating them into digital environments. We're modifying traditional tasks and adding an ICT or a digital component to it. And by doing that, we're redefining learning from an individual, locked away, private, time-measured event to something that has no start and no end, to something that has limited ownership, and to something that belongs to everybody who wants to collaborate within that process. So it's become very much a collaborative learning model. A wiki. We go on this week to talk about wikis a fair bit. I'm not going to talk that much about them here today because your assessment item, reflective item, was largely on 3.1, which referred to blogs. But a wiki is obviously just a group of web pages that allows users to add content similar to a discussion forum or a blog, but also permits others, some completely unrestricted, someone from the public domain, to edit that content. So there's a fair degree more risk with a wiki. In comparison, with the temporal information structure of blogs, it's useful to conceptualize wikis as spatial structures. Now, what that means is blogs usually follow time and post, date and post. So we see a sequence of information building over time. Wikis, however, are infinitely expandable. They collapse like a stand. They open up, they expand. They're not locked into blow by blow temporal information structures. They're actually quite spatial. They're exponential at that level. There's no point in time. So you can make links from one wiki to another. You can update them. You can have generations of responses. It offers a fast simplification of the process of creating HTML as well, and it's a really effective way to build and exchange information through collaboration. And hence its relevance particularly to the model I use, the contributing student model, where every student is actually encouraged to use and develop their own wiki throughout an entire course. The characteristics, really important thing here that we notice wikis and blogs are not the same thing. A blog is like the writings of one to many usually. A wiki is a website that allows a user to add content, but also allows content to be edited by any other user. They're personal, but they're collaborative. They involve the creation of documents without a lot of HTML knowledge. You can express ideas, relationships between the pages. Thus, you've got a networked, interrelated knowledge base rather than just a list of topics. Therefore, we can say they're atemporal. That is, the nodes or the interlinked textual references, they don't change according to time or date or version or post, but they're developed and they evolve and they grow through editing. They track the changes to individual pages over time, and this allows users to browse the development of the history of a page. And they also encourage cross-linking. Now, a wiki doesn't say, this is truth, digest it. A wiki says, here's an idea, here's a position, here's what I'm thinking of doing, here's what I've done. Okay, so they're dominantly spatial in nature. They open up the author of the wiki, they open up the author and the practice to engagement with others. They also provide a space where knowledge becomes networked. It's situated because a wiki obviously usually has a situation and a context, but it remains ephemeral. That is, it changes, and it can be changed, and it can be mediated. So while it says, well, here we have a topic, here we have a focus, it doesn't say, here we have the truth. It says, let's work towards understanding what this is. Let's develop a community or a community of practice understanding of what we mean. It's got educational uses, and I've put a few of them here. Wendy put up a lot in her weekly work too, so you don't need to pay that much attention to these. It's really up here as a summary of Wendy's material. You can develop research projects, and here's a couple of examples you can use in your reflections. They can be used for students for summaries of their thoughts, prescribed readings, You can build a collaborative annotated bibliography. You can throw your students a topic and ask them each to identify 2 or 3 readings, to summarise those readings in an annotated bibliography and comment on why they're useful to the topic. In the end, you finish up with 20 or 30 really good resources from a class. The teacher can publish resources like syllabus and handout, and students can comment on those directly. In other words, in week 1, you can spend most of your time clearing up any student concerns. Wikis can be used as a knowledge base for teachers too, and this is really important. And we're seeing that with you guys now, is sharing reflections, reviewing your teaching practices. Now, there's different versions and documentations. I'm seeing people working through, each of their different reflections and seeing it grow. And ultimately, in week 5, you do a meta-reflection, which makes you look at, requires you to look at weeks 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So you do your major reflective task, and you go back and, it's double loop learning, as a gyrus would say. You're going right back to that point and you're revisiting it. And it's full of easy navigation and categorization. The file management is pretty clear. And so there's lots of good reasons why wikis do, they're good, genuine documents. You can also use them, this point here, to map concepts. And they're very useful for brainstorming. And you can set a group of tasks simply to author a wiki, and you do it through a research base. It can facilitate a presentation in place of conventional software like Keynote and PowerPoint. You can actually do that, and you can do it live time too, by different people posting to a wiki as someone's presenting. And wikis are tools for group authoring. It pulls the members together. There's that social component, and enables them to build and edit the document on a single central wiki page. So if you're looking at your reflections, clearly the task is about blogs this week, but consider some of these points about what blogs don't do, okay, that wikis do better. And this may form part of your reflection, okay, it may form part of your reflection. You may start to differentiate between these digital tools. You may start to assign each digital tool a clear focus and a clear scope and a clear context. And again, look, at someone marking a paper like that, I would absolutely applaud that, because I think that's fantastic that you've got the insight to see that blogs and wikis have different educational uses and different advantages. Isn't that what we're talking about? Isn't that what we're trying to get at the basis of here when we talk about deep understandings and productive pedagogies? Remember week 2. Reflection task 3.1, here it is. An interesting little beast of a task. Think about the technological features of blogs. Notice that it's just blogs, including the editing potential, types of multimedia, and other content they can support, network, and collaborate. Link your thinking to week 1, the nature of your learners, and week 2, the nature of pedagogy. How could you use blogs in your teaching context? Learning with technology should be learner-centered. And it is anticipated that by far your students will be most busy in the online environments, with you in the role of facilitator. If you use any research or ideas from other sites, please be sure to reference them. So you can see the task there. There's a little value statement here. Learning with technology should be about learner-centered. So are you using it to be learner-centered, or are you using the technology to simply push across information? So I've come up with a little bit of a diagram here to help structure some of your thinking around this. And the diagram represents really how our brain works. I mean, it's a simplification. But what we've got here is the world, and the world is full of stimuli. And the stimuli feeds down into our senses. It can be sight, smell, taste, our 5 active senses, touch. But the world provides information to us, but most of it is dumped by our brain. Now you think about this. When we get into a school, we're dealing with learners, and learners are dealing with stimulations. For instance, if it's a 13 or 14-year-old boy, there's a lot of competing stimulants. So, we are dealing with a lot of different challenges there. So I've actually dealt with this in my wiki this week. So I've actually put up a topic for reflection tasks. So I've drafted a little bit of a response there for anyone who wants to go and look at it. You've all been invited to the wiki, but it's a summary of the sorts of things you may want to look at in this particular task, and I may or may not come back to that. It is in the wiki for you and is pretty self-explanatory, so you'll see that in the BAS 17 wiki, the sample one. But I unpacked this diagram. So our sensory memory is our level 1 memory. And all it does is make us aware of the world we're in. It makes us aware of the things we like, the things we don't like. It makes us aware of the things we enjoy, the things that bring us pleasure, the things that bring us pain. It's a sensory memory. And through that sensory memory, we start to actually acquire. We've got this process of acquisition happening. We start to acquire learning and behaviour. Now that goes in seconds and minutes to our immediate memory. Think about it. A dog rushes out from behind a fence and starts barking, snarling and spitting at you. Instantly, within seconds and minutes, as a child, you formed a phobia. Okay, so it's a long-lasting memory that is going to take a lot of rehearsal and a lot of therapy, perhaps, to get you away from that particular position. But when we look at this, we can see our immediate memory is seconds to minutes. When we start to say, oh my God, yeah, he didn't bite me, but it's okay, but gee, I had a hell of a shock. So in our immediate memory, we've learnt. We've collected the experience, we've acquired it, and we've formed a position. So there's been learning, social learning take place. Now at that particular point, two things can happen. We can rehearse that. So for instance, we may walk down every street and we may turn away from the fences when we get close to a fence in anticipation of a dog running out behind. So our immediate memory has taught us some defensive skills. We have a behaviour. The second thing that can happen is the brain will dump it. Now the brain has a little thing, very, very tiny little function called the amygdala. And it's a little bit like a human garbage bin. And here's an example for you. For instance, you go to a nightclub, you see someone you're really attracted with and someone you're not attracted to. The person you're attracted to offers you their phone number and you remember it. The person you're not attracted to offers you their phone number and somehow you don't quite remember it. You actually forget it. And there's a lot of reasons for that, because the brain is like a garbage bin. It sifts and it dumps information that it doesn't want, and it keeps information that it thinks it's going to need or it might advantage it. Remember, your brain is part reptile and part amphibian. So the amphibian side is developing. The reptilian side is really all about survival. So your brain will dump what it doesn't think it doesn't need. Now, once it's dumped that, of course, we retain some things. And the only way we can complete them and retain them and use them is to commit them to working memory, which usually takes minutes to hours. Now, this is why we go to learning. This is why school exists. This is our justification, that we can exercise and put our working memory to work in ways that are going to actually help us retain information, which is the goal of long-term memory, this connection here. Now, the reason why I'm providing and sharing this diagram is to say to you that digital tools play a huge role here in the seconds to minutes conversion to rehearsal. We have simulations, we have blogs, we have wikis, we have a range of tools that can actually help us commit those short-term experiences into working memory through rehearsal processes that can take hours and minutes, days, weeks, or in the case of a degree for teaching, 4 years. So we can see there that even in our working memory, you are still sluicing data through your amygdala into the rubbish bin. So it's still dropping stuff. So you may be exposed to 300 theories and you may only actually like 2. So your brain is constantly active working. But once it does identify what it wants, it works very hard to retain them and commit them to your long-term memory, which can be hours to a lifetime. And from our long-term memory, we go into stage 4 of learning, where we can use and modify information. We can retrieve it at need. And once we retrieve it, we can then actually apply it to the real world. So we can see that down here in this active area here between the working memory, the immediate memory and the long-term memory, here is where our digital tools and pedagogy are doing a lot of their work. We can see what a blog can do here. It can take an experience, a reaction. It can commit it to a process of learning and exploration. And then through the process of collaboration, we can work out what it means and how it's used and test it against the real world. That's what we're talking about here in this particular unit this week. And again, hopefully what your reflection will be encouraging you to think about. In short, we can talk about transforming the brain, what we call or what we know as neuroplasticity. There are 4 stages of learning. We acquire learning, we then rehearse it and process it, retain it, we try to keep what we want, but our brain sluices and drops what we don't. We have no choice over that. And then we can retrieve what we've retained by exercising and practicing a long-term memory and testing against reality. Our 4 levels of memory, bear in mind, are useful reflection too. Sensory, okay, smell screens. I wonder whether they'll ever happen. We can be aware of stimulus. It can take instantaneous. We can acquire a response, a learned behaviour. It can be seconds to minutes. Our working memory, minutes to hours, where we're rehearsing things, we're ruminating, we're running things through our heads. Our long-term memory, about retention, hours to a lifetime, things that we don't have to think twice about. And of course, your reflection this week is how blogs can help support this. What role blogs can actually play in piecing this all together. Due to the wiki, you are all invited into the wiki, and as you can see, I've actually used that diagram and explained a little bit more about it in the wiki. So, and linked it, of course, obviously to the blogs and blogs only. Talked about how the memory works, and have here also elaborated about the stages of learning and the levels of memory and how they come together. So bear in mind, your reflection this week really ought to talk about the learner who is learning and has memory. The process of memory can be supported. Deep understanding can be created through the productive pedagogies and digital tools that we apply in our classrooms. The main points of interaction are down here around the working memory, from the time we acquire some information to how we process it and how we retain it. Any questions, please?
Awesome. For my wiki, do I have to actually invite the rest of sort of the distance class so that they can interact with my wiki as well?
Look, I said last week, Lee, that you can do that. That's one way to do it. But what you're going to do actually is just invite a lot of people who aren't going to do anything. So I would save my effort, and I would actually try to identify. We talked about the pelodron last week. When 4 or 5 cyclists hit the road hard, they hit it really hard, and they leave the pack behind. And that's what I suggest you do. Invite 4 or 5 people into your network to actually, and you need to be there for us, committed to them as well. But what it means is, your wikis are actually dynamic, they're growing, and you've got a vested interest in each other's wiki. And it's a real sense of community. I mean, obviously, go broader if you want, do 8 to 10 people. But my experience is what I'll do again is just remind you once again about when you're doing these reflections, I don't expect a scientific thesis. Nobody does. What we expect is a dialogue between the learner, between digital pedagogy, and this week, obviously, between digital tools. Now, our topics for the next 2 weeks, obviously, you're going to expand your discussion. So by week 5, you're going to have 5 themes. And your final reflection, your 1,500-word reflection, clearly is going to cover those 5 themes, if it's going to be thorough and it's going to tick your boxes. So if you're doing, some people saying, oh, I'm writing too much, I can't narrow it down, that's okay, because that doesn't matter that much now. I'm happy to read a little bit more, frankly. It doesn't bother me too much. If I'm going to read 800 words, I'm happy to read 900. So the key is, the main thing is when we get to that 1,500 word, that's when the word limit matters. Not until then.
So will the next 2 weeks be looking at blogs in the reflections, or will they be something completely different? I guess that's kind of what I'm wanting to find out, rather than looking deep into Moodle to see what's next week's stuff. Is that
right? What I suggest you do then, Phoebe, is go ahead and have a look at the week 4 and 5 reflection tasks and see what they're actually asking you to do. I haven't looked at them yet myself, but my hunch is that they're actually going to broaden your focus away from blogs, so that by the time you hit week 5, you'll be able to look at the some of the cognitive and pedagogical functions of wikis and blogs compared.
okay? I'll
know that.
So just to clarify, for this first assessment reflection, it is just on blogs, is that correct?
That is absolutely correct, John. That's what the question says.
Okay, cool, because I think I've picked up an old assessment sheet somewhere. It just said technology.
Have small eyes, which are
And I was talking to somebody else online through our little networking, and the other person was actually going to do it on a wiki. So
Right. Okay. Well, I've made quite a strong point, John, in this this session.
yeah.
To remind people that the topic questions coming in, I'm
sure
sure there are a lot more. But still, if you're having trouble with the due date, which is theoretically tomorrow, please just get in touch with me. Let me know via email. And, you know, I am flexible to offer extensions. But it's such a minor task. It's actually pretty easy, I think, to get 6 out of 6 for it. So, you know, don't sweat too much. And if you don't get 6, you get 5, then have a close look at the feedback I give you, because my aim is to see you all getting 6. So please, you know, get the task in if you can. Don't sweat it too much. If you can't, get in touch and let me know so I know what's going on for you.